morning, everybody. How are you guys? How are you guys this morning? Are you warm in this room? Very cold outside. I'm glad you're in here. So I just want to say to our online audience, sorry, we've just started a little bit late. We were waiting for some people to come in. You know the Johannesburg traffic is not very, very kind in the mornings. My name, lots of you don't know who I am. My name is Kaya Dlanga. Yes, it is Kaya Dlanga. And on behalf of the entire team at Eat Big Fish Africa, thank you so much for choosing to spend your morning with us. And in the words of Jay-Z, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you decided to be here with us. So thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. I am just trying to... Are we working here? I'm not very good friends with technology. So, but anyway, so... There we go, sorry. All right. If you don't know who we are Eat Big Fish, a global strategic consultancy, the leading authority on challenger mindset, founded by Adam Morgan almost 30 years ago. That's almost as long as South Africa has been around. Some of you know our team as Delta Victor Bravo. What you might not know is that we are the official partner in Africa for Eat Big Fish. And our mission is to help our clients achieve ambitious growth by adopting a challenger mindset. We'd also love for you to stay connected with us beyond this morning. And how are you going to do that? That's what I'm going to do. So if you could please, ladies and gentlemen, reach out to your phones, reach out and scan this QR code on the screen. And please follow us in case you're not following us, because I know some of you are... I can see someone there who doesn't know how to work their phone. Do you need help? I just checked it now. Okay, but anyway, look for Eat Big Fish Africa on LinkedIn. You will find us there if you can't. Additionally, right in front of you, there are postcards. I'm sure you've seen those little postcards. They feature two exceptional white papers, The Eye-Watering Cost of Down Media and Anti-Dow, the Challenger Guide to Battling Banality. And I hope you have all had a whiff of burning money. Okay? We created a scent called Ennui. Okay? It is a smell of marketing budgets burning away. And I'm pretty sure none of you guys have been wasting your marketing budgets, right? Yeah, you don't look like it. And so I want to show you, this is our lineup today. These are our speakers. And I actually just noticed now that our speakers, right, like Adam, John, and over there is David, I'll introduce him just now, and Silas, all of them have biblical names. 2 Old Testament names, which is Adam and David, and the New Testament names, John and Silas. I don't know what that means, but it's provocative. And you may be wondering why we decided to have this event here at Gibbs today. And the reason we have it here today is because this is a center of academic excellence, and we are privileged to be in this room. And it would be un-African not to acknowledge our host, because you have to, I know as Africans, we have to acknowledge this person and say that, and luckily there are no politicians to be acknowledged today. And so for us, the man that we want to our host today, and he's going to welcome us officially, is a man with extensive corporate and academic experience, and that is Mr. Silas Matlala. We are his guests today. After Silas has come to welcome us, he will then pass on the microphone to David, who is our CEO. He's sitting over there like he's a naughty schoolboy. And please, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Silas Matlala.
Is it on? Yeah, thanks, Kaya. Morning, everyone. And glad you could make it. and glad you could join us. As Kaya said, you could have chosen to be anywhere, anywhere else. And my job today is very simple, is to welcome everybody. I am faculty member at Gibbs. I teach around marketing. I can see marketing colleagues here. Some of the industry colleagues. It's always nice to reconnect in this wonderful space. And why Gibbs? Because, in terms of our mission, very simple. It's about serving, inspiring, and advancing world-class business practices across Africa and beyond. And one of the ways in which we do it is to create a space for networking, space for dialogue, space for courageous conversation. And as Gibbs celebrates its 25th year of existence this year, we've had some big events and big courageous conversation. And undoubtedly so, this one is one of those, because really the cost of dial advertising, as you will hear, it's all about marketing effectiveness. It's all about the effectiveness of the spend that we put in together. So to you guys at Eat Big Fish, you could have chosen to be anywhere, but welcome to Gibbs. And to everybody else, welcome to Gibbs. Thanks.
Thank you, Silas. Morning, everyone. Thank you for the warm welcome and for hosting us, Silas and team Gibbs. Very nice to see you all here today. Thank you for joining us, and to the people online as well, thank you for joining us. I have the very pleasant task of introducing our keynote speaker today. He has a podcast called Let's Make This More Interesting, in which he interviews a variety of different characters from around the world who have to make their topics, conversations, what they do in their daily lives and jobs interesting to keep people's attention and sustain interest. And some of those people are, for example, the head writer of Sesame Street, the global head of marketing for TikTok, professors, stand-up comedians, a variety of different people, including a science teacher named Addison Brown. And if you haven't listened to episode 5 in season 1, you'll get if you have listened, you will get the reference to the dog behind me. And if you haven't, I hope I've piqued your interest, and you can go and look that up after and find out all about that. But a really fascinating podcast that has informed our speakers' content as a part of his journey over the past 3 years. And he'll explain more about that to you in a minute. Of course, I'm talking about Adam Morgan, who's the founder of Eat Big Fish and a celebrated author of the books that you see on the screen behind me. And Adam has helped and consulted and guided and helped a lot of large brands and smaller brands right across the world find their voice and fight for progress in their categories with the nature of challenger mindset. And so we welcome Adam to share his journey. He's come off the stage about 2 months ago at Cannes. The year prior to that, he was at Cannes as well, presenting some of this content. But he's packaged together for us today a series of different pieces of content from that entire journey over the past 3 years to share with you the eye-watering cost of dull and what that means and how to tackle it and overcome it. He is a visionary, he is a mentor, and he is an incredible leader. And I'd love to, you all to give Adam Morgan a big round of applause. Over to you, Adam.
Very much, David. That's very kind. And a big thank you to Silas for hosting us today, and for Kaya for the setup. I wish I was there in person. I can't be there in person. Believe me, where I am is colder than where you are, and it's the English summer here, but let's ignore that for the moment. I'd like to start off by talking about what I want. I had the great pleasure, as David said to you, of interviewing the head writer at Sesame Street for the first 20 years of its life. And I said to him, what was the secret of Sesame Street? How did you do this extraordinary thing? You managed to get preschoolers interested in numeracy and literacy, something that professional educators said was impossible. How did you get them interested in these topics? And he said it's very easy to get anybody interested in anything if you think about and create little dramas. And there are two parts to creating a little drama. And the first part is you have to know what the lead character wants. When somebody comes on stage or somebody comes on your screen, you have to know what they want. If you don't know what they want, you're just watching somebody standing around talking. So let me tell you what I want. I want the marketing and communications business to look much harder at the vast tide of dull and mediocre stuff we're putting out all the time, every day, and be much less tolerant of it. I want, by putting a concrete cost on how much it actually costs us, a concrete figure, how much it costs us to be dull, to make us realize we just can't afford to do that as responsible business owners anymore. And I want to create a series of provocations, a series of tools, constructs that we can take into our businesses, and ways in which we can have conversations with the key people around us that will stop us being dull again. Now, I recognize nobody in this room has ever done a piece of dull work. God knows I've never done anything remotely dull in my life, but we may have friends for whom this is relevant and interesting. So let's just talk a little bit, as David says, about an overview of the different bits of the project so far and where it's going. It's kind of a 3 or 4 year project. So I'm going to share kind of the first kind of 2 years worth of outputs with you in part. And then I'll share some provocations with you, and just perhaps something useful you can take back if you're interested and stimulated by this. Conversations you can take back into your own business, into your own brand, with your own partners, with your own clients, and provoke, I suppose, a more interesting and more engaged response with our audiences. So just in case you think that my talking about this vast swathe of dullness is a sort of rhetorical flourish that a speaker does at the beginning of a presentation, let's look at some facts. So this is TV. This is one of the most engaging mediums in the world. This is where we would put a lot of our money if we could, but we can't afford it, and it's not practical. And actually, the world's moving on a bit in terms of social, as we all know. But nevertheless, very engaging medium. And this is a company called System One that has pre-tested every single ad that is run in the UK and the US since 2017. So roughly 55,000 ads in each case. And one of the ways in which they test them is to ask the person viewing them at the end of seeing it, what emotion did it make you feel? And you can see the legend on the left-hand side, right? So the strong colors at the top are to do with negative emotions, contempt, disgust, anger. So things from ways you might experience charity ads, for instance, all the way through to the pale and the strong green, which is happiness and surprise, positive emotions, which are the kind of the ones that they correlate obviously with success and engagement and interest and predictors of commercial return. And in the middle is gray, and gray denotes, after seeing this ad, I felt nothing and I have no inclination to do anything. And we're going to use that as a proxy for dullness, which I think is legitimate. Neutrality. And you can see that the most common experience, most common feeling in the UK and the US is feeling nothing at all after seeing advertising, this incredibly powerful medium that we all have at our disposal. And actually, when you get to B2B on the right-hand side, it's even worse. So this is an extraordinarily prevalent problem, dullness, and we have the data to actually demonstrate it and prove it. And what's odd about this is that we have known for, 15 years now, ever since the work of Peter Field and Les Binet, we've known that emotion is absolutely essential commercially for us. We know that emotional advertising is much more commercially profitable for us. We know that the data is in. We're just not responding to it or using it in the right kind of way. It's not that we don't know what we should be doing. It's that somehow we're not actually doing it. So I had a conversation with, started off this project by having a conversation with Peter Field, who is, one of the kind of foremost experts in marketing effectiveness. And I said, all the stuff that you're doing, Peter, about showing us the upsides of creativity, it's just not cutting through for some reason. What if we could take a principle of Daniel Kahneman's about loss aversion, that the pain of losing something is twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something, and look at the cost of loss. What are we losing by being dull? Can we put a concrete cost on being dull? And that's where the project started. So it was Peter and us. We then involved System One, as you saw, and actually I'm going to talk to you a little about some work with Amplified and Dr. Karen Nelson-Fields, who's one of the world's leading experts on attention, particularly attention in media formats. And so there's now 4 of us, and the group is gradually getting bigger. It's a non-commercial alliance, if you like. We are just traveling because we're passionate about the topic that we're talking about and looking at it from different angles and contributing different things to the project. I'll try and show you glimpses of what everybody is contributing to the project as we go through the next 40 minutes or so. It's a roughly 3-4 year project. The first year was very much about, and I'm going to talk a lot about dull content, primarily, effectively, that we're putting out. I always thought, frankly, the project would be just about dull content. And then Karen Nelson-Field came along and said, I think you're missing a really big, possibly more expensive cause of dull, which is dull media. So that became the second year of the project, which Karen and I presented at Cannes today, and I'll give you just a little glimpse of that. It's not really for me to present, it's for her to present, but I'll give you a little kind of glimpse of that as we go. And then the idea is next year, but a very interesting person who thinks that they can measure dull product and dull innovation. And so that would be the third stage and possibly the concluding stage of the project, at least in terms of the analysis, that the kind of series of tools and provocations that Eat Big Fish is developing will continue and continue to explore and play out. So let's start off, though, with that very first piece, which is the work with Peter Field. And I should just, for those of you not familiar with Peter's work, so Peter and Les use a data bank called the IPA. The IPA is arguably the most robust data bank in the world. It is mostly UK data, 70% of UK data, about 30% of it international, 600 econometrically argued cases of kind of marketing and communications effectiveness. And what what Peter did, again, was he took, and bear in mind, these are all successes, right? So we're kind of loading the dice in the favor of dullness to start, actually. So these are all effectiveness. And he split out the cases into 2 kinds of cases. Cases that had succeeded by using kind of rational information, rational persuasion, effectively facts, that kind of thing, which is the gray column on the left. And we're going to use that as a proxy for dull. Successful, but dull in the way that they got there. And in the yellow box on the right-hand side were cases that sought to be famous, that sought to be emotionally engaging, emotionally exciting as a primary objective of what they did. And he looked at, for the same commercial return, how much more it cost the dull cases to succeed. And it cost them, on average, over 7 extra points of excess share of voice, which in the UK amounts to roughly £10 million. That's to say that it's possible, with dull content, to still be successful. But in the UK, in terms of the average brand campaign, you have to spend £10 million more in media to get there. And if you were in the US, you'd have to spend, roughly a factor of kind of 10x that. So let's say $100 million more. And I'm afraid I don't have data for South Africa. I would love data for South Africa. If you're sitting on vast piles of data you'd like to share so we can actually do this in South Africa, that would be wonderful as well. But I am guessing that all over the world, this is pretty similar. So let's use these as directional, at the very least, in terms of what's happening. So we start off by looking at the cost for an average brand owner of being dull. And then we said, well, let's try and look at the cost for an industry. So let's look at some very big numbers. Let's go to the US. So we went back to System One. So System One at the time was just testing just testing TV. It now looks at other kinds of platforms as well, but this is just TV analysis. And they did a very interesting thing, right? We split out 4 quartiles in terms of increasing orders of dullness. So the least dull stuff, the stuff that actually people feel least neutral about, is the column on the left in yellow. Then the other quartiles where people get progressively more and more, I'm not really paying any attention to this, go down to the right. And you can see roughly how it splits in terms of proportion of ad spend here. The next break across those quartiles looks at the bang for the buck, so that for the same amount of money you spend, what's the share of market commercial return that you get? And you can see that there's a very high correlation, obviously, between how dull it is and the commercial effectiveness that you actually get. But that's not what I actually said I was going to talk to you about. I didn't say I was going to talk to you about the upsides. I said I was going to talk to you about the downsides. So the next thing that we did was we said, okay, those 3 duller columns on the right, how much would they have to spend in extra media to have the same commercial return as that most interesting quartile, that top 25%, how much extra would they have to spend in media to get the same commercial return per year? And the answer was they'd have to spend roughly 190 billion, which is effectively the same as the GDP of Greece. So when we talk about the extraordinary cost of DAO, it is a very, very large number indeed. And we should have a courageous conversation, as Silas says about it, because it's costing us, as responsible business owners, much more than we think it is. And we need to be much more intentional about avoiding it. Just for those of you that are less interested in numbers and more qualitative in field, we did an experiment as well. Bear in mind that the System 1 data, right? It's a huge database, 110,000 ads that they've tested since 2017. I said to John Evans, who's the Chief Customer Officer, let's do an experiment. Let's take a locked off shot of a cow chewing grass for 20 seconds and put it through your database and see what proportion of ads it beats in terms of, emotional engagement. And so I'm not going to show you the video, but essentially this is a still of the video. So this is not Ridley Scott at golden hour. This is a rather dull Welsh valley with a not particularly attractive hill town on a cloudy day and a strand of barbed wire in front of the cow. Cow chewing grass, 20 seconds, beat 50% of the ads in their database. And I have to say I'm laughing here, but I perhaps the most appropriate response is crying, really. I mean, that is really shameful. That is really shameful, and we cannot allow that to happen anymore. Surely we've got to attempt to be more engaging than that. So, okay, but that's just TV, Adam. We know clearly the world is about more than TV. So we've started looking at collecting other databases. And the problem is the availability of data rather than the intent or the time from our side. So the next thing I'm going to show you, again, forgive me, is just in the UK. Again, I'm looking for broader data sets. If you've got them, we'd love to see them. So this, again, is actually from an award ceremony. So this is the DMA in the UK, and the awards are for kind of total campaigns, throughout the entire funnel. And one of the things that they ask the judges are a mixture of clients and agency, and they say, right, all of these are successful, but in terms of alongside judging the success of them, want you just to rate them in kind of interest value, effectively. So the bot, so 0 would be least interesting, least kind of commercially engaging, least creatively engaging, all the way up to 10, which would be the most kind of creatively engaging, the least dull, the most interesting. And what I'm going to show you now is the difference in these very successful cases between the bottom half and the top half, as you get to be the most dull, or the sort of, the bottom half in terms of dullness, the most dull. What's the effect it has on business impacts and brand effects through the funnel? And you can see there's a very considerable drop-off across all sorts of metrics, from consideration, purchase intent, a whole bunch of different metrics here. And we're clearly just starting to scratch at the surface of this. There's a lot more to be explored, but this very profound effect that dullness has throughout, just not simply about engaging attention, but in terms of our engagement, our motivation, what then happens afterwards, is considerable. And Peter's gone on to explore a lot of this in his own work. Peter Field in his own work. So, for instance, you're looking at the effect of dullness on trust. And dullness actually requires quite a lot of trust requires quite a lot of emotional engagement to actually build. And dullness is even more expensive if you're trying to build trust. And clearly, there's quite a lot of large companies, and you might be one of them, for whom trust is really important. And trust is not built through being rational and factual. It is built through very kind of emotionally kind of compelling, very engaging work. And Peter's work is doing a lot of work around that. Which brings us to the smell and the scent that you might have waved your noses at as you came into the room. So before Cannes this year, I had a French guy who rang me up, who's the president of an agency, said, really interested in the Costa del work, Adam, and really interested in replicating this in France, trying to find some database around that. So, can you help me? And I said, well, sure, I'll do what I can, but just out of interest, what is the cost of dull in French? And he said, it's le coup d'ennui. And I thought two things. One is, what a fabulous language French is. Even dullness sounds somehow sexy. in French, which perhaps does it a disservice and the French a disservice. But the second thing is, ennui felt like this one of those old kind of rather cheesy perfume launches from the 80s. And so we launched at Cannes this year, and you're experiencing for only the second time, and certainly the first time in the Southern Hemisphere, the global launch of Ennui. And I hope you enjoyed it. It's a kind of whole smell and tell experience. We can tell you about how much money costs, dullness costs you, and you can smell it burning in front of you at the same kind of time. So the second slice of data that I'm going to share with you is the work that Dr. Karen Nelson-Field and a team at Amplified put together this year for Cannes. And as I say, it's not really my story to tell, it's Karen's story to tell. And I really would encourage you to download the white paper from the QR code that was shared and what you have on those little cards in front of you. But just wanted to kind of flag a couple of things. One is I was very surprised that I was getting into this conversation because I thought when we started the project, it was all going to be about dull content. I'm an ex-ad guy now, obviously, in the consultancy business. I was primarily frustrated personally at the amount of dull content was going out. And so she said, well, actually, you're missing the whole point of dull media. And I said, well, can media really be dull? Is that a thing? And she said, of course it can. You know, dullness is about the ability to hold and retain attention, right? That's what it's about. And active attention is absolutely primary for all of us as communicators and brand builders. And some media is very good at doing that, and some of it isn't. So, and you can talk about media being dull in two different ways, right? So it can be intrinsically dull. It's a high scroll fast decay environment. It can be contextually dull. There's lots of distractions going on. You know, the ads on my screen, but look, there's Timothée Chalamet, and look, there's something else happening. My favorite sports star over there. Lots of stuff going on that makes it contextually dull for me. So dull media is a thing, and we're going to talk a little bit about how that works and the effect it has. She also replicated, she and a team replicated those 4 quartiles of dullness, and the 4 quartiles that we talked about with the System 1 approach. So we're starting to get some consistency in the way that we are starting to break out dullness in each kind of analysis that we're doing. And one of the key distinctions that she makes, and many of you will be familiar with Karen's work and will know this, is the difference between served and seen. That a lot of the media metrics that we use assume that served is the same as seen. You know, if this was available on our screens, we saw it. And her work and their approach measures real-time actual experience. So looking at real-time viewing experiences, they're using biometrics that looks at kind of eye tracking, facial detection every 10th of a second to say that actually, while this stuff is up there, what are you actually doing? Are you looking directly at it? Are you looking nearby? Are you not looking anywhere near it at all? And her whole point is that, you know, served is not the same as seen at all. And in that gap, in the delta between those two things, is a huge amount of media waste. And so thinking of media dull is not only useful, but important. And measuring active attention rather than viewability is the thing that we should be actually looking at. And she talks about active attention volume effectively as being a key metric that we should start to include. So just to say, this was a very considerable study. It was across 12 countries, so we're starting obviously to move beyond just the UK and the US at this point, which is great. A lot of different brands. She's looking at a lot of different kind of metrics in terms of effect on short-term conversion, longer-term ROI, as well as obviously the breakdowns of what actually happens in terms of the proportion of people actually viewing and the amount of time that they're viewing it for. And I'm just going to give you a little glimpse of it because I hope it'll whet your appetite for the bigger white paper, and I'm sure she'd be delighted to talk to you about it. So this is just a very, very good example of a snapshot of what she's talking about. So what we think we are buying is on the top of these 2 bars, which is, you know, effectively this is viewable because it was viewable, therefore it was seen. And she breaks down attention into 3 different kinds. So active attention is where I'm looking, I, the viewer, or the potential viewer, I'm looking directly at what is being shown to me. Passive attention is where I'm looking nearby. I'm not looking directly at it. It's sort of in my peripheral vision, but I'm looking directly at it. And no attention is where I'm not looking nearby at all. And that actually, if you break down apparent viewability into those different kinds of attention based on the media platform, you can see that there is a decay, there's an increase of dullness as you move to the left, and a decay in the amount of active attention that we get. And that is very expensive. And similarly, in terms of those metrics, she breaks it down into 4 quadrants, typically in terms of the amount of people that are actively looking at the screen. So least dull, 59% of people are actually looking directly at the screen and the average amount of time they're looking at it for, 13.5 seconds, all the way down to the bottom, the most extremely dull, where, a lot of our media that we're buying is going into these formats where only 6% are actually looking, and they're looking at it for kind of 1 second or less. And the point that she makes is actually that the amount of time you're looking at it for is disproportionately important, in fact, for challengers, for instance, because if you are looking to build memory structures, and we know that memory structures are really important for us as brand builders, you need 2.5 seconds or more to build a memory structure in somebody's mind. If it's less than that, you simply can't do it. So if you are a market leader with existing, brand assets that are very highly remembered, very easy recognized and remembered, then actually, perhaps you don't need, it's expensive, but you don't need much more than 2.5, 3 seconds. If you're a challenger, you absolutely do. It's absolutely fatal. It's kind of existential for you. So the decrease in attention, disproportionate, and dull media disproportionately damages challengers as they move forward, is one of the key findings. And look, there's a lot of data, as I say, in that report I would really encourage you to read. But in terms of putting a number on dullness, she did this very interesting thing. She looked at the average monthly spend for advertisers in the US and what spending in dull media environments cost them on average per month. And she said it comes out as 43 cents in the dollar. Now, just bear in mind the scale and the robustness of her metrics and the study that I talked about. Very interesting data starting to emerge about just how expensive this is. And we are looking to put, financial, hard, concrete financial numbers on it because we want it to be a conversation we can have internally. There might be corporate reasons why, I don't know, our CEO wants us to be dull. There might be, they're very risk averse or, for whatever reason. We can choose to do that if we want, because dullness is a choice. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, it is a choice. We choose to be dull or we choose to be interesting. But if we choose to do it, let's understand and let's have our eyes wide open about just how expensive it is and just how much it's costing us as responsible business owners as we move through. So look, what do we do about this? It's all very well to talk about this, Adam. What are we actually going to do about it? Well, I suggest there are kind of a couple of ways we can go here. One is we can choose to be dull. There might be reasons why we want to do it. We are risk averse for whatever reason. We've got more money than we know what to do with. Very good reason to be dull if you want to. And let's not judge. You can choose to be dull, but know the cost. So whether it's Peter's work, whether it's Karen's work, we can choose to do that if we want to. But I guess most of us don't. And most of us want to make some kind of intervention and are appalled at the idea that what we're doing is going to be as inefficient as that and as expensive as that. And nobody really in this room or in any room, it's not like we're not smart, well-intentioned, incredibly hardworking people. We all wake up wanting to do the very best for our brand and for our clients' brands. We all want to do the best, and we are trying to do the best with our available information and our available kind of resources. So I'm not going to go into now. We can perhaps go into the Q&A if you're interested about why I think this is happening. I'm not going to talk about why I think it's happening. I'm talking what's actually happening. But so what do we do about it if we want to do something about it? And so part of what I'm doing, as I was saying, and working very much with David and the team, is to create a series of tools and exercises and provocations that we can use to stimulate the kinds of conversations that will get us to more interesting outcomes. And I'm not suggesting that any of these are going to make you fall off your chair, but I am going to suggest that, for instance, I'm going to offer a tool which has 5 questions to it, that if we all really lent into these 5 questions much more seriously, much more often, we would produce much less dull stuff by and large. So my expertise, as David said, is I've spent 30 years researching, working with, writing about challenges. And for challengers, it really is existential to be dull. I had the great pleasure of doing an interview a long time ago with a South African copywriter called Nick Warren. I'm very interested in industrial theatre in South Africa. How can you take these quite dry topics and create them? It's very engaging ways of communicating with quite skeptical audiences very often about these topics, about safety measures or certain financial issues. And I was talking, and he amongst other things, he used to write for industrial theatre. And I said to him, so why are you, in industrial theatre, you're doing musicals, you're doing, very kind of active kind of drama. Why do you need so much kind of drama? And he looked at me entirely seriously and said, when it's a matter of when it's a matter of life and death, you can't afford to bore the audience. And for challenges, it kind of is existential, right? We can't afford to bore the audience. That's one of the things exciting about them. People sometimes say to me, Adam, you've been studying challenges for 30 years. Don't you get bored of it? And I'm going, no, how could you possibly be bored of studying challenges? They are the anti-mare. They are the most interesting, most stimulating brands that you can challenge and you can study and explore in marketing. So what I'm going to talk to you about is partly based on that study, partly based, as David was saying, on this podcast, Let's Make This More Interesting, which has been deliberately looking beyond just marketing. So there are some marketers in there beyond just marketing, a wide variety of people whose job it is to make dull subjects interesting, often because the stakes and the consequences are very high. If you're a physics teacher, it really matters whether you make the subject of forces interesting today to your students. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about people inside and outside marketing, what we've learned from as I populate these 5 questions and these 5 bits of stimulus for you. And hopefully you'll accept it in that kind of broader sense of legitimacy and validity. So here are the 5 questions, so provocations for you. And I'm deliberately doing it as a spider graph. And I'm going to invite you to actually take this quite seriously and think about your most important project for this year, and assessing it as I go through these 5 questions against these 5 questions, not on a tick yes or no, but on a scale of 1 to 10. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do I think we are doing or starting to deliver against this particular question on this particular project? And at the end of it, I'm just going to ask you to draw a little picture and say to yourself, so where could I punch into these particular provocations and questions more to really dial up how I make this project, this bit of communication, this idea, even perhaps this product, more interesting? So the first of these is, are we meeting them where they care and speaking to them in their language? The first fundamental of making anything more interesting, all of my interviews tell me, is connection, right? We've got to really connect with somebody. You've got to really speak to them about something that they're actually kind of caring about in some kind of way. And that's easier said than done. So again, I'm sorry, I only have UK data for this, but in the UK, 56% of people can't think of a single brand that they feel connected with or understand them. And if Peter Field were in this room, he would say the biggest mistake we make is we assume people are much more interested in our category than they actually are, because we're so close to it all the time. We spend a lot of time thinking about it. They don't. They're not really that interested in it. And this 56% of people can't think of a single brand. This includes some of the most interesting brands and categories out there, right? This is fashion apparel, sports apparel, all that kind of stuff. Most of us are not in those categories. So we've got to try much harder than we think we do to really create that connection and make them engaged. Just going to offer 2 examples, one from outside marketing, which I absolutely love, one from inside the marketing world. So from outside marketing, so I don't know if you've been to see the latest Bridget Jones movie, and if you haven't, I can really recommend it. I think it's the best of all of them. Fantastic film. And I went to see Richard Curtis, the director of the first film, talking about the very first Bridget Jones's Diary, and how he made it. And he was saying we had this fantastic, it was fantastic filming. We wrapped the filming. All the stars went back. Renee Zellweger went back to wherever. Hugh Grant went back to the golf course. And we finished the film and I edited it. And I thought, I'll just treat myself. I'm going to take it out for a test viewing in a cinema. So he rented, I think appropriately enough, in Notting Hill, a little cinema. And he sat at the back with his baseball cap pulled down, and the crowds filtered in, and then the crowds sat down, the lights went down, and the music came up, and the film started. And it's a comedy, right? You've seen it. He waited for people to laugh. And 10 minutes went by, nobody laughed. 20 minutes, it's all very quiet. He thinks, this is not good. It's supposed to be a comedy. What's going on here? Half an hour, 45 minutes, people aren't really laughing at all. Hour and a half goes by, lights go up, people filter out, and they just haven't laughed. And he thinks, well, this is a disaster. I can't get the stars back. I can't reshoot it. What am I going to do? And he realizes that, he realizes that people aren't engaging with the lead character, Bridget Jones, because they think she's just, posh, well-to-do young woman who's making a bunch of disastrous choices of her own choosing. And I don't really identify with that. So he said, I just did one thing. I took one scene, which is the scene on your screen here. which was at the end in the first edit, of Bridget sitting in her pajamas, in her bedsit, drinking too much wine, eating ice cream from the tub, singing very melodramatically all by myself, the Nick Cayman song. And I took that and I put it right at the beginning into the opening credits. So it's the very first thing you see. And he said it completely changed people's connection with the lead character and with the film. Because as soon as you see that, you think, I've been there. I've sung not that song maybe, but a song of my choosing pretty like. I've drunk that very large glass of wine. I've eaten that ice cream from the tub. I've felt that heartbroken. I'm identifying with her for what she feels as a human being and what she's going through, rather than her demographics and her choices and that kind of stuff. Completely transformed everybody's relationship with the film. That sense of, are we meeting them where they really care? He changed that fundamentally just by a single piece of editing. And I think you can see brands starting to do this really well, right? So this I love. So Pampers have moved from being quite a rational brand over the years, and of course they have lots of wonderful product innovation, which prevents leakage and all those other slightly disgusting things that we as parents start to get used to quite quickly. And they're now talking about, for instance, don't fear the punami. And if I were to say to you, and I can't see you, so you don't need to do this, but metaphorically, put up your hands if you changed a nappy or a diaper in the past 30 years, and keep your hands up if you've experienced a punami. All of you would put your hands up, and you keep your hands up, really, because we've all been there. And there's a little sort of smile. We sort of look at each other and say, yeah, what was yours like? Oh, Jesus, mine was in Monterey and couldn't believe how far up the back it went. It was an unbelievable experience. We've been there. We've seen it. And that moment of connection that the word punami and that little smile gives us, much, much deeper than any of the kind of the rational things that we could say about nappy changing or lack of leakability and that kind of stuff. Really interesting example of meeting them where they care and speaking them in their language, and taking it from a kind of 3 or a 4 customer insight all the way up to a much higher score on that question. So my question for us is, if we're really going to build connection as the primary basis for making something interesting, what is our equivalent of that punami? What's the idea, the frame for the conversation, the language that shows that we really understand what matters to them? I think we move too quickly past that initial insight thought, and we're not really pushing it any further. And I'm imagining that John is going to come on and talk to us about, one of the things he's going to talk about is just the power of laughter. And very often I think we see something and we laugh at it and we move on, and just stopping and recognizing that in that laughter is an insight. We should pay more attention to that. It's just part, I think, of how we need to start thinking differently about how we engage with the kind of the insights and thoughts around us. So, fundamental connection. Are we meeting where they really care? Second is, are we telling them something they think they already know, or are we denying one of their key assumptions and surprising them? There's a fascinating study written in 1971 by an American sociologist called Murray S. Davis. Murray S. Davis was a professor at Northwestern in the US. And he looked at what he called the most important 100 social studies. So the most important social studies of the last 100 years. This was in 1971. So he started with Freud and Marx and went all the way through to Marshall McLuhan, R.D. Laing. And he looked at what made them sort of culturally resonant and still talked about or not. And he said what makes those that are kind of still culturally resonant and talked about and discussed both academically and in popular culture is not just that they're true, but that they're interesting. And what makes them interesting is that they deny a key assumption of the audience. Interesting studies are those that deny a key assumption of the audience. Dull ones are those that confirm a key assumption of the audience. I'm very interested in this distinction about how do we deny key assumptions of the audience to make ourselves more interesting. And this notion of surprise and surprising them by denying their assumptions is kind of fundamental to a lot of the conversations that I've been doing in the second season of Let's Make This More Interesting. So, for instance, I interviewed a guy who's the director of the Assassin's Creed video games, who's also a professional improviser, Simon Peacock. And he said, I can tell you as a performer, but I also can tell you as kind of as a director, whether audiences will articulate this formally or not, what they want to be is surprised. And of course, surprise in the modern digital world is getting harder and harder, isn't it? I don't know if you read Filter World by Carl Jacob, but it's very interesting at talking about what we all kind of know, which is that, look, one of the big trends has been towards personalization. Personalization is seen to be a good thing. One of the things personalization reduces is the amount of surprise, because your Spotify algorithm or your Netflix algorithm gives you more of what it thinks you like based on what you've already liked. And so you get fewer and fewer surprises showing up in terms of what you're being offered. So the amount of surprises we're actually being offered in this more personalized world is decreasing. And yet we have this unconscious appetite for being surprised. That's a huge opportunity for us as brand builders, as marketers, as communicators, that we need to lean into. And indeed, when I showed you this bit of data earlier on, the bottom green tranche here is about surprise, and that balance between happiness and surprise is one of the most important predictors System 1 have found in the world of TV of success in terms of attention, but also kind of commercial success. And kind of within your own worlds, I think a really interesting example of this is Sanlam, right? So Sanlam, very big financial services company in South Africa and indeed elsewhere. I'm sure you'll know this example. It's a very celebrated example, and rightly so. They're very much about financial inclusion, obviously, and yet most people don't really want to look at money or talk very much about money. They want to engage. It's quite a difficult topic. It's quite fraught in all sorts of ways. We tend not to open our bank statements or digital bank statements or real bank statements. We could possibly help it, many of us. How do you get people to really engage in something they think they don't want to talk about? And the example is you have to challenge their assumptions about A, the topic, and B, how interesting it can be. And I think many of you will know, well, you all know probably about the F Show. I think F Show is a fantastically good example where they essentially they've got a bunch of comedians and said, talk about finance, talk about money in a way that's really engaging and exciting. So I'm just going to show you a little clip of it as an example of, here's a company challenging the fundamental conventions and assumptions of the way people think about their category and their relationship with it.
Have you noticed when you go do grocery shopping at like month end, you have some other confidence? You are pushing a trolley. Sometimes you just let it go while you... and then pull it back. You're just throwing unnecessary things. You are throwing in shampoo. You have no hair. You put your... Nkolisi, why are you buying shampoo? You don't know it's month end.
Fabulous idea. And so they have had enormous success with it. They've shaken off associations of being boring and out of date. They've increased associations about being, for me, about being honest, about being trustworthy. They've increased consideration overall. And a lot of that comes through that, what do we need to challenge about the way that people think about us? And clearly this can be about more than, the way that you communicate, right? So I'm very fond of Vacation as a brand in the US. Many of you may know about it. So it's a brand that started a few years ago, and it's a deliberately kind of retro feel to it's sun cream, sun protection. Very retro feel to a lot about what they do and a lot of their communication. Very strong on scent, slightly old-fashioned ways of communicating in many ways. But one of the things that they did brilliantly was they produced this innovation where they did it in the form of a kind of like a spray cream, which they called dessert for your skin. And it was sun cream that you could spread on that had this foodie kind of nature to it. And Kim Kardashian loved it, and it kind of suddenly went viral and all that kind of stuff. Very interesting conversation with the CEO where he talked about the fact that, of course, look, at some level, it's great that Kim Kardashian talked about it. But actually, what breaking the convention of format and the expectations around format did was much more important than awareness. Sunscreen falls into the important but boring category, right? It's very important for us, and in South Africa, you know that better than most. Very important for us, but actually it's quite dull. And what doing it in this format and using these sort of foodie cues and this very kind of sensual, interesting kind of quality to it gave was it made people think about it more and put it on more. And that's important because we don't put a sunscreen on as much as we should do or as frequently as you should do. And secondly, when they put it on, that kind of delicious sensual feel meant they put on more than they otherwise would have done. And that is also important because actually we should put on more sun cream than we actually do in reality. So in both particular cases, it prompted new behaviors that were important in what is otherwise a boring category. So that sense of, let's do this not just simply for awareness and active attention, important though it is, but to shift the behaviors that we need to, We need to be more interesting by challenging assumptions and surprising people. So my question for us here is, what's the one customer assumption about us or about our category that would benefit us to challenge? And what's the behavior shift we'd like to create by being more interesting in it? Third question. Are we using emotion, drama, and storytelling? And this is the kind of no shit Sherlock bit of it, where you think, oh, for heaven's sake, Adam, I can't believe you're going to talk to us about storytelling. And I'm not really going to talk to you about storytelling. I'm just going to say again, on a scale of 0 to 10, it's not a tick or not, it's how well are we using that? And particularly this idea of emotion and drama. So let's go back to Sesame Street. I said right at the beginning when I was talking to Norman Stiles, the head writer at Sesame Street, it's all about little dramas. And there are two parts to a little drama, right? One is you have to know what the character wants. And the second is you have to know what's in the way. And it's the tension between what the character wants and what's in the way that creates the little drama. And I have a relationship with a VC company that invests in challenges. And they've got portfolio of around 20 challenges. And I was talking to one of the partners about this and saying I'd had this very interesting conversation about it. And he was saying, well, and I was treating it as if it's an executional thing, effectively, a piece of drama in how the brand shows up. And he said, I don't think it is an executional thing. I think it's a more fundamental strategic thing than that. He said, if I think about my portfolio of 20 brands, the ones that are doing well are the ones where the leaders of those brands understand the answer to these two questions. They understand what they want for their brand, and they understand what's in the way. The brands, I think, are drifting, where the leaders haven't understood the answer to one of these two questions. So he said, I think this is a fundamental sort of strategic drama at the heart of successful brands. It's not just about execution, and that unless you know what your brand wants and what's in the way and bring that to life in some kind of way, you're not going to create this kind of compelling relationship with the customer. And I thought that's interesting, isn't it? Because at some level, one of the things we like about challenges is these things are visible. They're screamingly visible. We know that. We know what they want. We know what's in the way. They're showing us those two things. And that's what makes us engage with them. We know that, who gives a crap or back market or whatever our chosen brand, challenger brand at the moment is. We can see those things. Whereas big established brands, not so much. There's no sense of urgency. They don't really want anything other than to get us to buy it. What's in the way? I don't know. Who knows? Who cares, frankly? So I get to say, back market, really interesting. French unicorn, at some level, simply selling reconditioned tech, pre-owned iPads, iPhones, laptops, that kind of stuff. It would be very easy to say the same for less, have a very rational piece of communication. But they don't do that. They create this wonderful story about big tech is trying to make us far too fascinated by the bright, the shiny, the new. We don't need that, so they create this monster, which is big tech, and this pretense that the bright and the shiny new is kind of important and vital, whereas actually it's not really, and they can sell you stuff that is much more affordable where you don't need all of that. I like this too, just in case you think it's all about ads. So this is a sushi restaurant in, it's now in London. It started in Denmark. This is the menu. You sit down and it says, and pretty much it's a sushi restaurant. So we know from sushi restaurants that there's a veneration of, the Japanese and the art of sushi. The menu says, as a head chef, do you promise to respect and honor the ancient Japanese sushi tradition in everything you do? No. Now, it's a really interesting bit of drama on the front of the menu as you sit down in a restaurant, and it gets you interested in the story. What is the story? The story is it's started by some Danish brothers who are, they're half Japanese, half Danish, I think. And so they want to give you a Japanese sushi experience, but actually they want to put their own particular spin on it. So it immediately gets you into that story in a really interesting way by a very simple piece of drama on the front of the menu. This is not complicated. It's not expensive, but we have to be intentional about it. We have to want it. So building emotion and drama into it. How might we bring what we want and what's in the way alive in our story, in the pack, in the product experience, on the front of the menu, for heaven's sake? Okay, fourth question. Are we showing real distinctiveness and character? There's a fantastic thing you might have seen on socials about a teacher who is responsible for collage work amongst kids. And they hand out glue sticks for the kids. And they say, I used to have a lot of problems getting glue sticks back at the end of the class because the kids are very distracted and the bell goes and they all run out. And so I'd lose all these glue sticks or they'd end up in a corner being uncared for. And I did a very simple thing, which is I gave the glue stick a name. I called it Derek. And so then I have a particular thing. I say, right, so, David, you're looking after Derek today. And then tomorrow, Silas will look after Derek. And I want Derek to come back at the end of the class. Simply calling that name, I get the glue stick back every time, a disproportionate amount of care and attention, because I've made it into a little character. But this notion of distinctiveness and character for us and how we can punch that up, I think, again, is something that we don't understand the value of strategically. So we've done a lot of work in the past with LVMH, and in particularly on their what they call well, I'm saying what the category tends to call brown spirits, but I mean cognacs and whiskies. And one of the brands we worked on in the past is Ardbeg, which is a very smoky, peaty whiskey from the island of Islay. Those of you that are whiskey drinkers will know quite a strong taste. The master distiller describes it as biting into a spiked ball as a taste, which is a fantastic descriptor by the person who makes it. And they haven't got a rich, unbroken tradition of 200 years of distilling history. They've been mothballed twice as a distillery in the history. So they have to punch up something else. And what they punch up is that very strong, distinctive character. And you can see here they are, activating it as if it's this kind of B-movie monster. And calling yourself Wee Beastie just as an innovation name for whiskey is very unlike the rest of the category, very much playing with the conventions of that. And I had the pleasure of interviewing for the project a guy called John York. John York set up the BBC Writers Academy. So he trains writers for the BBC to write more interesting drama. And I said, tell us a little about character development, John. So give us a, as brand owners, how could we very simply develop the character of the brand much more easily? And he said, well, you could do a very simple thing, which is you just take one characteristic of the brand and you punch it up 200%. What if we took one character of our brand and exaggerated it 200%? So let me just give you a couple of examples, because sometimes this can be little quite sort of theatrical bits of thought leadership. It's not really fundamental to the brand itself, but it might be about how certain aspects or certain details of the brand show up. So Renault is a brand that's not enormously successful outside France, but the Renault 5 was one of its iconic models. It was sort of small, affordable, sort of mass market model. And they've just relaunched the Renault 5 as an electric car. And it looks great. It's beautifully designed. It's a nicely put together bit of tech. And they've decided to lean into its Frenchness. So alongside the kind of beautiful design, they have this interesting little basket down there. What is the basket? It's a baguette holder. So you can buy a baguette holder for your Renault 5. So when you go off to the bakery, because that's obviously what we all do on a Sunday morning when we're feeling French, or a Monday morning or Tuesday morning, you just hold your baguette in you without getting those unpleasant crumbs all over the passenger seat, which always drives me mad with my baguettes personally. And then also, of course, you can customize the gear shift to look like a lipstick. And if you want to be very patriotic, you can make it look like a French, even more like a French lipstick than you go. So is this fundamental to what's in the engine? No. Are they little details that get talked about and written about a lot? If you Google Renault 5, absolutely they are. And a brand, of course, that's done character and personality much more fundamentally, and I won't play this video, is Nando's, and it's a fantastically good example, born out of some of the quality of the product, but also born out by a very deliberate desire by the two founders to be the antithesis of the establishment, effectively, of KFC, and say, well, what does KFC stand about? How can we be the opposite of that in terms of our personality and character, and really dial that up? Wonderful example of a brand where distinctiveness and personality internally and as part of the culture, as well as the external brand expression, has been a huge part of what makes it interesting and engaging for us. So finally, I'm running a bit long, I realize, is about, are we using the real bar to judge what's interesting, or some invented one of our own? Far too often we talk about, is this good enough or not? Yeah, I think that's pretty good. That's certainly as good as what the rest of the category is doing. That's not the real bar, what the rest of the category is doing. The real bar is everybody is competing for our attention all the time. Everybody in every category, and Liquid Death are a very good example. You might know them, a water brand coming out of the US, in various other countries now, that have kind of completely reinvented the notion of how to market water. And the founder, who was the frustrated ad guy, talks about the fact they're in the entertainment business. And when you take entertainment really seriously as entertainment, the bar is not other commercials. The bar is comedy specials, it's films, it's TV shows. That's the bar we're competing against if we really want attention. And as Karen Nelson-Field would say, if you're looking at the difference between active attention and passive attention is where your ad is up, but people are watching other things. If you want them not to watch those other things but watch your ad, you've got to think about what your real competition is. And that bar, resetting the bar, really important to us in terms of intent. So 5 key questions. None of them will make you fall off your chair. All of them essential. If you were to have done something dull in the past 5 years as a piece of communication, I bet if you looked back on those 5 questions, you'd say, we didn't really deliver against one or more of those. So just think about the most important project you've got and just gently mark yourself on how you're doing across, on a scale of 1 to 10 across that. And think about, what could I punch up more that would be much more powerful for me? So look, let me wrap it up. 3-year project, started off looking at dull content, giving you a little flavor of dull media. As I say, not for me to talk about really, that's Karen's presentation, but do download the white paper, which goes into it in some detail. And year 3, we're going to come on to talk about dull product and dull innovation. And then I think that will be the completeness of the analysis. The development of tools, as I was saying, and provocations will kind of continue, and that's where we really sit. But we've got some other interesting stuff coming up. So we're working with a company called Vlismas, looking at what it means to be dull in social and how that's fundamental, because what's dull in social is constantly changing, right? What was interesting even 2-3 years ago in social, in terms of how people show up, is not interesting anymore because people have seen that. So that's a very fast evolving area. We're also doing some work with EY on linking with some work that they're doing about expressing this in the language of the CFO and the CEO and the private equity kind of investor. So how can we take all of this and wrap it and frame it in terms of talking about, diluting a value proposition, for instance. So just frame it in the right kind of language so we can take this and have it with any kind of investor or stakeholder that we need to persuade and take with us. Even there's somebody who's got in touch who's doing some fascinating work around live commerce. I don't know if this might be important in South Africa. Live commerce is very big in Asia. So these are brands who've got live commerce sites, is looking at dullness in live commerce and what that actually looks like. So we're trying to take it obviously far beyond the initial interest in TV and look at what dullness looks like and what it costs in a wide variety of other kind of modern formats in which brands show up and try and engage with their customers. And one of the reasons that this is all important is because, of course, the tech trend is going completely the other way. 2 weeks before Cannes, this was a kind of gauntlet laid down by Mark Zuckerberg for Meta, saying essentially, don't worry. We can efficiently take care of everything, brand owner. And this is going to be very seductive, right? I simply give my thing to them, plus a slice of money, they'll do it all. And I would argue we are in the foothills of dullness, frankly, at this point, if that's the case. Once we kind of automate it and AI takes over and that kind of complete kind of automation of everything, that's not going to be good for engagement or attention, frankly, for any of us. So in fact, perhaps we should look back. This is how they used to test cinema advertising in LA in the 1960s. 1 question, 1 dial. You simply were asked to rate, is it very dull, normal, good, or very good? Fantastically simple metric for us. And I wonder, as we become more and more sophisticated and introduce more and more metrics about how we're evaluating what we're doing, this perhaps is the one metric that we've forgotten that is perhaps the most important one of all. So look, the answer is there is only one tagline for Ennui, and the line is, can you afford it? Do look at the reports. I think they're both interesting and stimulating. I hope you think so too. And I think we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A now.
Thank you. Give it up for Adam, guys. Jeez, thank you, Adam, for those absolutely incredible insights. I think that I've got an idea for somebody here who's got a lot of money, whoever you are. So what if you were to start a media company that refuses to fly dull media? But wait, there's more. Maybe when your media is interesting, you pay little less. The more dull it is, you pay more to flight it, right? I think it's a freaking great idea on my side. So now we have a 15-minute Q&A session with Adam. And if you have a question, please I'm going to ask you very, very nicely that you have to lean forward into your mic so that Adam can hear, but your David and Dutch will hand over numbered cards for people who have questions, and just to kind of make sure to follow the order, I think, in which the questions will be asked. And you guys don't look like shy people, okay? So I'm pretty sure you have some questions. And one last request, so please when you ask your question, please be crisp and be very clear, and in the words of the great philosopher of our time, the Honorable Jacob Zuma, no meanders. Okay, straight to the point, all right? So questions, please.
Put it on. Put it on.
Yeah, you just press.
There you go. Okay, thank you for the instruction, Nomi.
Good morning. My name is Chris Buerta. Quick question. Are there any trends in dullness? Is advertising communication becoming progressively more dull, or has it always been dull and is now just being measured?
Well, that's a fantastically good question. So I think that I can answer that approximately and directionally, but not completely. So I think it is now being measured. I don't think it really was measured. I mean, it was being measured in the 60s. We are now putting a concrete cost on it at the moment. But certainly in the UK, and I can speak for the UK, there was a time where the question used to be asked of people as part of a kind of general tracking study of the general population, to agree or disagree with the statement. Sometimes I think the ads are more entertaining than the TV programs that they are within. And in the US, you got a surprisingly high score. In the kind of 80s, you got a surprisingly high score. And certainly when I started out in advertising, which was in 1982, so a very long time ago, you look at beer commercials, for instance. There was a whole bunch of categories that used humor a lot, very entertaining. And there's a lot of data about the fact that humor, for instance, has not largely disappeared, but really the amount of humor has really decreased over the last 20 years, for instance, in the use of advertising, because people are concerned about it, because people think that actually we're more serious now, we should perhaps be more purpose-led. And there's a lot of evidence being developed for the first time, for instance, about the commercial value of humor. So Bridget Angier, again, with the IPA, has done a lot of work around that. System One have done a lot of work around that. So we are starting to be able to quantify things that people previously regarded as being perhaps simply kind of executionally interesting, but options, what the real commercial value of those things is. So my sense is that actually it has become duller. If Peter Field were in the room, he would talk about the fact that the emphasis on performance and performance marketing, where essentially you assume that somebody is already in the category, so all you need to do is really get them across the line at the end, has led to a much smaller effort to really engage people, because you don't have to, because you assume that they're there. And that actually he would argue that has had a really significant impact on the dullness and the kind of creativity that he's seen and he's been tracking over the last 15 years in particular. So there are some ways of measuring it, I think, and assessing it. And certainly if you start to look at, future trends, I was talking to somebody the other day who was saying that they were working for a very large holding company, and that a very large American kind of apparel company had just signed up to produce 75% of the content in the middle and bottom of their funnel using AI. You would argue that's not going to be good for dullness. So there are various ways of measuring those trends, I think. But again, if Peter was here, he would talk about the emphasis on performance as being a real detriment to the amount of interest and creativity that he's been seeing and measuring certainly in the UK and through the IPA Bank.
Great, thank you, Adam. Thank you for the question, Chris. We've handed out all the cards, so there are 5 questions from the room allocated. I can't give any more out at this point, so there's a 2 coming. I've also got 2 online. Dutchy's got 1 online, so we'll read those as well. If you don't mind, if you have a question that we can't accommodate now, there is another Q&A after John. Otherwise, please write it down and we will get back to you. If you'd like to hand us a question, we can certainly get back to you after this event. Right, number 2. There you are. Microphone?
Press
Yes.
it, yeah.
Okay, hi. So I'm curious to know, you spoke about the cost of dullness in content, media, and products. Have you explored the cost of dull in experiences? And would you use a similar 5-point question model or methodology to measure the impact of experiences or dull experiences?
So we have, it's a great question. So we have talked to a company that measures experience. And they had the rather interesting assertion that in experience, neutrality is the new negative. So that actually in a world where audiences' expectations are going up all the time around experience, and if you talk to experience creators, and if you're an experience creator or involved in experience creation, you'll know that's the case, right? Audiences' expectations are constantly rising. The experience you could get away with 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, possibly 5 years ago, is not the experience you can get away with now. And we live in a world now where, offering an experience where people have a kind of neutral reaction to it actually is kind of the new negative, was their point. I love that idea, was very keen to see some data around it. We are still exploring that. So no, I'm interested in your question. If you've got any data around it, I'd love to see it, because I think it'd be critical, but we're still working on that.
Great stuff, thank you. Question number 3.
Over there, yeah.
Sechaba.
Thank you very much, Sechaba Motsielo. Perhaps the elephant in the room is this: are dull people capable of seeing stuff that is undull? Thanks.
So I choose to believe that people are not intrinsically dull or interesting. And the whole point, I suppose, about the podcast, which is let's make this more interesting, is that being more interesting is a quality that can be developed effectively. And I guess the underlying premise of asking those 5 questions is if we ask those 5 questions, and we might choose to ask them in the presence of more interesting people than ourselves, if we think of ourselves as dull. So we are as interesting as the people we surround ourselves with, I think, and that might include ourselves. So I think we can develop in ourselves. But certainly if we ask those questions, we ask the right questions in the right order, in the presence of interesting people, we can do that. The related question, I suppose, though, is how do we know if we're being dull or not? So how do I know if I'm dull or if I'm interesting as a brand, as an individual? And again, I think, one of the other tools we've had, which I won't go into now, is 4 very simple questions to ask yourself about whether you're being dull or not. But one of those, for instance, is one of the interviews I did was with a reality TV show host, and she had produced various sort of Got Talent shows, Celebrity Apprentice, that kind of stuff. And she says, I've done roughly 12,000 auditions now, and I'm fed up with everybody saying the same thing when they come in. So now in the reception area where, if you're going for this audition for one of her talent shows, she said, I put up posters saying, don't come in saying I'm a people person, or I'm in this to win this, or I think this is my year. Because if you say those things, everybody else is saying exactly the same thing. You won't get through the audition. So one of the ways, for instance, I think, in our kind of, test to see whether you're being dull or not test is, are you saying the same things other people are saying? And clearly there's a kind of a trope, isn't there, in our business about the sea of sameness. It's very easy to assess whether you're saying the same thing as everybody else is. And actually to set yourself a very simple target, well, these are things I can't say anymore. That in itself will propel you to a more interesting place. So I think it's a great question, but I think A, it's the company you keep, and B, the questions you ask yourself. And I think it's very easy to assess whether you're being dull. I think it's important that you do that. Are we showing up really in an interesting way, or are we not? And how you hold your feet to the fire and ask yourself, really, let's be really honest about that. That is a much harder thing.
Thank you, Adam. Question number 4. Who had question number 4? There you go. Just make the mic green. There you go.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Primrose Tubani. My question goes to, apart from language and humor, what is it that you can use to capture your audience? Because I think one thing I've learned recently was that, okay, I'm from Mpumalanga, and I realized that I've been trying to capture an audience that don't understand me when I speak maybe English. They would understand isiNdebele more than they understand me. But still, even if you communicate with them in the language that they understand, they probably will pay attention to humor most likely. So if you would like to capture maybe an audience, apart from using maybe the jokes, because you see what social media is using, they're using more humor to capture the audience to pay attention to whatever brand is selling. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really great observation. And one of the reasons I was saying I was very interested in industrial theatre in South Africa was because very often you're communicating with a very diverse range of kind of languages effectively there, or perhaps relatively little kind of common language in certain situations. And so the need for physicality, for humour, for music, for drama become really important. So those are, I think, really interesting constraints that can be very beneficial because they force us to become almost more exaggerated in what we're doing in certain kinds of ways. That makes us more engaging, more compelling. So this whole notion about how you take those constraints, about how you need to communicate and turn them to your advantage, I think is again really valuable for us as we try to be more interesting.
Thank you, Adam. All right, number 5. Last question from the floor, from this room, and then we'll go to the online questions.
Hi, I'm Mongezi from the Lead Creative and Roger Wilco. So, quick question. I suppose short-termism has become a huge thing as something that affects marketing and creative effectiveness. So 2 quick questions. Despite the data that we have about customers, why has advertising become duller? Is it becoming duller? And also, lastly, with people giving us all the information that they're giving us, why has dullness increased because brands are chasing short-term results?
You're absolutely right about short-termism. So they do the kind of effectiveness team at Cannes do a series of a sort of survey of marketers that are coming along to look at what the key challenges they're facing are. And short-termism has consistently been up amongst them. And this year was the most important challenge that marketers identified. So you're absolutely right. It's central. I think this goes back to so why are smart, well-intentioned people doing it? So the pressures of short-termism are some of it. And there's a lot of work being done. If you saw some of the other presentations at Cannes, a lot of work looks at how you balance what's right in the short term with what's right in the longer term. And this notion that actually being much more engaging, even in the short term, is still valuable and important. So this idea that short-termism means you get away with being dull is actually flawed. You get much more bang for your buck if you're engaging even in that kind of format. But I think also there's, quite apart from short-termism, there's some unintentional ways in which people are being dull because they're taking as best practice and optimizing what they see as social trends, and everybody else is doing the same social trend. It means that the world is getting blander, right? So, famously, if you haven't read there's an very, very good article called The Age of Average by a strategy director called Alex Murrell, which is downloadable. I'd really encourage you to read it. He talks really about the homogeneity of the world around us and how, the Airbnb that you take in Rio looks exactly the same as the one that you rent in Riyadh or the one that you rent in Australia. They all look exactly the same because they're all measuring the same kind of social media kind of sense of perfection, which I think is technically called the Australian coastal look. And equally, cars are all kind of white or grey or black these days. We're losing that sense of colour. The world is becoming kind of blander. So yes, short-termism is one of those things, but it's only one of those things. And I think if we put it all down to short-termism, although there is a truth in that, we're probably doing ourselves a disservice.
Thank you, Adam. All right, we have 2 more questions, both from online. Dutchley's going to read out one, I'll read out the other, and then we can move on, Kaya, to the rest of the agenda.
Hello. Adam, it's Dutchley. We have a question from Tim Baker in the online audience, and it is there a scientific formula to creating non-dull work? What is the balance between rational and emotional?
Blimey. So I'm suspicious of anybody who claims they have all the answers to anything. And so I think there isn't a scientific formula for it. But clearly there is a lot of evidence that emotional is disproportionately more valuable and important than rational. And I do think that actually in starting to get to some fundamental principles, a bit like the ones I've started to outline, we can start to get to, if not a formula, a cluster of qualities that do define what makes something more interesting and engaging. And it'd be fascinating, again, as we see John talk later on as a kind of master of his craft, that even within some of those areas, there are very particular areas of kind of expertise and excellence and development. So I love the question. At some level, I'm on a quest to find that. Do I think there'll be an exact scientific formula? No. Do I think that we can get much closer to a common understanding between all of us about what those qualities are? Yes, I do.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, so last question from the online forum. If my campaigns or media are dull, should I stop running them altogether? If they are not creating value, what advice would you give?
Well, I think if they are dull, recognizing and perhaps quantifying the amount of waste involved is certainly something you should be doing. And then asking yourself if your company and you can afford that. If you can't afford that, then you need to be stopping it and working with people and rethinking your approach to do something much more interesting. Yes, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because we're all smart, well-intentioned people working really long hours, checking our emails at 11 o'clock at night, getting up early in the morning to do that thing that our partner was supposed to have done, but they haven't actually done. So it's hard to stop and take a good, honest look at actually what's working and what's not. But surely this is what we have to do. Surely, if we don't be much more intentional about whether we're being interesting or not, we aren't being the responsible brand and business owners that we would want to be.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you so much for all the questions. I know you would love to get to more of them. We'll answer everyone as we can, as soon as we can after this event, and including the online questions, which we have on record now. Thank you very much. Kaya, over to you, if you can take us further into the agenda. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Okay, and now I have the pleasure of introducing one of South Africa's sharpest comedians, and many of you know him as a comedian, but actually what you don't know is that he is now an academic. And that is John Vlismas. But I've had the pleasure of actually knowing John Vlismas for quite a number of years, and he is quite a kind and generous man. And I know when you look at him, you think that, nah, he can't be kind and generous. He does his best to kind of hide that, but if you know him personally, he is that kind of person. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you, please put your hands together as John gives us his unique perspective on creativity, conformity, and a mindset that will hopefully make us less dull.
Thanks, Guy. Thank you. Sorry, I have to stand here. It's the podium. The problem with life, we'll do anything to get the perfect shot. Hello, everyone. My name is John, and I identify as artistic. There's no real test for that, but I have written, performed, and painted, so I am on the spectrum. My pronouns are ha. You'll forgive me if I read this. I'm a bit anxious. Some of you might know that last year I came out as non-dyslexic. I read. God, it feels good to say that. It's like it's exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I'm a reader, Mom. I used to be so ashamed of that. I read in secret. Sometimes with strangers in public toilets. There's something so terribly exciting about a rushed paragraph of Dostoevsky or Beckett in the urgent fluorescent silence of a locked cubicle. That sudden release of understanding. But as Jessica in the Woolworths queue says, let's not go down that road, because Jessica is sad and doesn't have a purpose, and talks to ChatGPT late at night about her relationship with Ryan, who will never really love anyone except Ryan, and protein shakes. I'm sorry, I'm drifting. I may also be ADHD, I'm not sure. Nor is my family, nor is medical science, actually. Psychiatry is now behind chiropractors in the credibility queue. Anyway, these days I'm shameless. I read quite openly, sometimes more than one book at a time, when one just isn't enough. But please don't worry, I'm not unsafe. I wear my glasses. I also don't care what people at the Braai think. And anyway, fuck them, because research shows that reading is a leading way to avoid marrying your cousin. Also, full disclosure, I really want to talk about being authentic today. So in a very poorly judged attempt to stay relevant at my age, I asked ChatGPT to write this today, and it didn't, because it turns out that eating disordered drug addict with clinical apathy and herpes dressed as comedy is not a great prompt. So this is all me. Thank you for having me, Adam, David. It's lovely to be here, to be paid, to be here. Whatever this is, I still have no idea. But whatever is going on here, it's wonderful, David. You've done a great job. So often the case with marketing. I do want to discuss something really important this morning. Well, it's important to me, maybe not to you. I'm not going to talk about climate change. I'm not going to talk about Gaza. I'm not going to talk about Donald Jeffrey Trump. I know that we're supposed to care about these things. I get that. You've got to post your outrage wherever you get a chance. You have to wear the T-shirt. You've got to get your family to pick sides. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm 52. It is just so exhausting to be on permanent Instagram jury duty for the whole world, especially if you're like a brand manager, or a sales assistant or a comedian or a marketer. We are so hopelessly underqualified to have an opinion and so vocal, it's exhausting. It really is. I don't have to worry about being thrown out of a country club. I was never welcome there anyway. And they still don't know why. They know I look like something they don't agree with, but they can't put their finger on it. I'm so tired of people giving me their... I'm a single mother, and I've shut up, Megan, you statistic. I don't know how, having a brain doesn't qualify you as a brain surgeon. I don't know why people think that being an example makes you an expert. I don't understand that at all. And everyone is now. Everyone's a qualified empathy Sherpa or a cognitive shaman or a fucking primal alpaca coach. Everyone is a guru, and it's enough now. It stops. And by the way, can I just say that the word coach, much like the word barista, which is simply a Spanish word for modest dreams, the word coach will never change definition. Someone who dilutes their own failure to launch into groups of others. And actually, no one needs a life coach. That's bullshit. You don't need a life coach. Life teaches you how to live if you pay attention. That's how it works for you. Get a real job. So there'll be no self-congratulatory virtue porn comments on the Middle East or what US pedophiles deserve. If it's okay, I'd like to use this time this morning not to blow smoke up my own arse. Although this one time in Amsterdam, perhaps not appropriate here at the auspicious auditorium of Gibbs Business School, where future marauders are churned out. I'm really not saying that avoidable tragedy isn't morally unconscionable. Obviously, it is, because humans can be awful. You just don't need me to tell you that. You can rely on your own experience. Humans are awful. Think of your last family lunch. You just want to kill them. And this is, I think, why I'm here to talk in very much support of the fabulous work that Adam's done. Because the worst thing we can do is to be boring. And watching his presentation, I'm like, I've been trying to tell you arseholes this since I was born. Finally someone has measured it and is actually credible and telling you the truth. Because for me, boring is to get obsessed with the obvious. That's the boring. And I understand that we are all socially conditioned to try and belong. So we blurt out connecting statements all the time. We just want to know that we're like other people. Stop it. I'm going to kill you if I meet you socially and you do that. You know, you won't believe what Trump said today. Shut up. I'm not interested. It's very simple with Donald Trump. The atomic orangutan did stupid shit, is currently doing stupid shit, and will do stupid shit. End of Bri. You know? That's it. I'm too old now. You know, he says there's no global warming. He glows orange. Why are you surprised tomorrow that he's going to do something stupid? It doesn't make any sense. We watched the whole sheer chaos of Season 1 White House. It was wonderful. This is just Season 2 playing out with a bigger budget because their numbers were excellent. And it's the same with the ANC and the DA and government corruption and water and power and education and healthcare. Like, can we stop talking about this? It's obvious, you know? So this is why I've left comedy, essentially, and I'm in education. Because we have to do something. We are too stupid to run the show. We really are. I know the climate change is important and the planet's going to explode. I get that. Okay, but that's obvious. What's really interesting is we don't give a shit. Because while we cook the ocean, we get the Stanley mugs in all the colors, everyone. You can have avocados all year round. There's collagen in the coffee now. You can be wired and elastic at the same time. It is fantastic. It's wonderful. There are now plant-based burgers that are more harmful to this planet than beef ones. Do you know how cool that is? Vegans are now evidence-based dicks. What a time to be alive. So I agree with Adam. We've lost our capacity for vanilla. We are too overstimulated for beige. It just becomes wallpaper. And then, you know, to complicate things, there's research, like real research, not the person in the Woolworths queue. It's like real research that suggests that our brains shrink as we interact with AI. They physically shrink. We get doffer. Okay? That's happening. And not only that, but our attention spans, as Adam pointed out, are over-leveraged. So you might even start out interesting, but like you need to hold our attention because we will throw you on the pile. You know, we really will. Does anyone here remember kale? We couldn't give a shit. Hey? It was a green leafy thing that would add 50 years to your life. Gone. We are bored to death of kale. Oscar Pistorius, a no-leg runner who killed his lover on Valentine's Day. Gone. We're not interested. Even Johnny and Amber, like a couple of months ago, we couldn't get enough. Now, bored. So we chew through these things all the time. Oats. Oats is bullshit. We don't really love oats. Oats is ridiculous. Like, it's a really good idea to eat oats for bread. It's bullshit. It is a lump of beige. Then it just goes in and it puts more lumps on gym bros who've got nothing. No willy, breast milk, rage. It's a pointless thing. So we don't even like ideas based on merit. We don't like them. What we want is Ozempic. This is our vibe. Hey, a drug so dangerous it eats your muscle to make space for the fat you will put on when you fall off the wagon and face plant into banoffee pie. Woohoo! Fantastic. The Marvel Cinematic Universe. Boy, it was so interesting for like about 3 years. It's just cuck. We don't care anymore if Doctor Strange and Black Widow are thruppling with a magnetic trance skateboarder on fire. We want real shit. We want grainy footage of invisible bombers dropping actual bunker busters into sand dunes where the things have been moved overnight. That's exciting. We want crazy autistic people, billionaires in the White House with their children on their back making friends with orange rapists. This is exciting. When Elon says he has an X on his back, he's not kidding. He's talking about his son. But these are all low-hanging fruit. Even what I'm talking about now is obvious. I can't talk to you about obvious if I'm obvious. And that's what's really interesting. So I want to look at the definition of boring. You see, while we leap like a non-binary spider them from one cultural obsession to another, there is a new kind of boring that has infected all of us, even me. It's sneaky and it's devastating. It knows no limits, it doesn't discriminate, and anyone can catch it. I know I have. It's trying too hard to be interesting. We really are trying too hard now. So please, dear God, save us from those who are desperate to be interesting. You know what I mean, Jaguar. Hey, Jaguar made such a big mistake. It thought we gave a damn about people who were different. That is too obvious and it's wrong. What we like is when Jaguar spends millions and millions of pounds to create a marketing car crash on social media. Now we'll watch you for like a week. We'll be so interested, and then we'll chuck you on the kale pile. So that's interesting. When you follow it up with stupid statements, by androgynous people, copy nothing except social media trends. Create exuberance, yes. Manufacture your own interestingness, that's a good idea. So after a long life of saying rude things, I really hope I don't go to hell. Because I know what hell is. It's a podcast. An eternal podcast by some self-aware, evidence-based single dad renouncing a toxic corporate career to raise his children in a woke way on raw meat and gratitude in an indigenous forest with tribal approval and ashwagandha. Guys, we have to stop this, please. Someone, I'm going to execute someone soon. It's going to be terrible, and now that's on tape. This thing infects everyone. Every alienated chancer with a boom mic is now Jordan Peterson. Everybody with an ethical cotton shirt and moppy hair is a founder. If you've ever had any trauma now, you're a survivor. And if you're a mommy, you're a superhero with an iPhone. We are people who march against labels, but fuck, we work so hard to get them. It's crazy. And that's what we're seeing in the world right now. We want free ideas as long as they're mine. We want free speech as long as they're my words. It's the same thing. It's just dressed differently. Oh, and by the way, you're not an empath, Brian. You're a human being. Oh, thank you so much. I don't want to mess up your shot. Without the photograph, what value will any of this be? He's got terminal marketing. Shame. We've turned feelings into a disability. It's crazy. They're not a LinkedIn flex. You're not a hero for loving your children. That's your fucking job. Nature wants you to love your children. In fact, it tricks you into loving your children so that you will let them live to have children of their own. It doesn't make you the dad of the year, okay? You're just following your biological instructions. Instagram relationship experts are summarizing people they've never met. These are the new horoscopes. I don't care what your Enneagram says, UIJBS. It's also statistically impossible that there are that many narcissists on the planet. It's impossible. Maybe you're the problem. It may just be that you become overly fragile as you refuse to treat triggers as essential lessons in your own resilience. Being triggered is also boring, actually. So just shut up, take your NMD+, your CBD, and your cordyceps, and follow the bloody 7 KGB steps that they showed you on Instagram to reboot your nervous vagus system. You walking panic attack. And just by way of public service announcement, vocal, binary, and reductionist views on the Middle East don't make you a better person, Jared. It's complicated out there. They're trying to sort it out. Nor do ice baths or breath work. They do work for a while, and I want to just point this out because they're novel, and that's how humans work. Something novel we'll adopt, but ultimately you are genetically programmed, according to the longest-running happiness study in humankind, to revert back to about 65% happiness. What keeps you evolving as a species and being successful is restlessness and discontent. So you can try the ice bath. It will work for a while. It's not going to work forever. You can try the new diet. It's not going to work forever. So I'm just letting you know. But it's not all bad, because at least people with social anxiety disorder now have jobs on Instagram as well. And I'm so happy about that. They're doing such cool things. They channel the Anunnaki. and also Christ sometimes, or the Galactic Light Council, and they are telling us that they're already here. They're hiding in a Mexican cenote, and we've missed them for all these years. I'm just not that keen to join anyone who speaks like whether it's an evangelist or a lunatic. Oh, and by the way, you'll be glad to know, I don't give a shit what's under the pyramids. We've managed this far. I think we'll be okay. And also, Beyonce does not make hand signals in photographs. The thing about a secret society, it's a secret. Don't be an arsehole. Believe me, the Illuminati do not make overt signals in public. Oh, and Satan doesn't run the music industry. He doesn't have to. They have label executives. He worships them. And paddle. Paddle is just small batch artisanal tennis. That's what that is. You don't need a carbon fiber racket to hit a clinically depressed tennis ball, I promise you. You're sad if you play paddle. So when we talk about the cost of dull and the cost of being boring, I think it's super important to define what interesting means. Because if you're going to take it to mean unique, perfect, and driven and striving endlessly, you're basically making problems for our children. Social media is cruel. And if you've ever adapted an image of yourself online, you've contributed to the cruelty of those algorithms. That's on you. And me. I've done it. The picture of me up here has been altered, so I'm just going to own that. We don't need curated, textured veneers of life. We don't want to be the ultimate school mum, the CEO, the gym bro, the Google guru, the nutritionista, the LinkedIn whisperer, or the bucket list ninja. Also, when you film yourself doing charity, that's just a glory hole for you. Just do it. You don't have to tell us about it. It's kind of embarrassing. And I know what some people are thinking. You started laughing, now you're thinking, what a tragedy. Why so angry, John? Why are you so dark? Why are you so brutal? Don't you watch Love Island? No. Because you're also asking yourself, when you do laugh at what I say, why does the laughter come from so deep? Because it's true. There is no comedy greater than truth. Because it's connection. And that's all we have to do while we're on this place for a brief moment. You want to do something useful, connect. That's it. Social creature, we have become disconnected. I may not have the data that Adam has, but we've all been tricked. We've been tricked into believing that we are hyper-connected in this world. We have never been so dislocated from our identities as we are right now. We live in a permanent state of traction. None of us formed the community to which we are striving to belong. And it's that separation that is your anxiety. It's your panic attack. It's your constant restlessness. Just stop and connect. How do you connect? Don't go out, go in. You want to understand an audience, understand yourself. For years, I went around the world. Everyone said, how do you perform in Germany? And I was an idiot in the beginning, because I said, well, you go early and you do research. Excellent. 2 weeks in Berlin, what am I? A shit copy of a German. I didn't grow up there. I don't know what it smells like. I don't know what it feels like. Just go there and be a South African in Germany. Be the only one in the room. Realize that South African is a screensaver. So is your gender, so is your race, so is your religion. All these things really don't have to get in the way of connection. But we make a big deal of them, especially if it's mine. So, what isn't boring? I'll tell you what isn't boring. The fact that many Americans voted for Donald Trump, that's interesting. Not that Donald Trump is an idiot, that's obvious. The fact that democracy actually does work. Because if you ask for it, you get it. That's happening in America right now and all over the world. We have the government that we formed. That's the truth. What's interesting is that we build monsters like Elon Musk by worshipping them, and then we tear them down when they embody exactly what we love them for. Every billionaire on this planet that we hate understood the brief that we wrote. You can say you hate Jeff Bezos, but secretly you want your child to be him. That's what you wish for your child. We wish what we hate on our children, and it's interesting because we make gods, and the moment we stop voting for them, they become our monsters. That's interesting. Our irrational faith in anti-aging serum and lion's mane and crypto and celebrity and fashion and being lean, ultimately our faith in consumption as the cure for the human condition, is interesting. What's wrong with us? Not who's the bad guy. What did I do, Meaning and purpose created by agencies is often Botox for brands. It's a way to relax reality cosmetically using the diluted poison of insecurity. And everyone in this room does it because we want to get paid. You know what isn't boring? Awkward, vulnerable, present. Showing our children that they have a space being represented in the world, just as they are, not how we want them to be, or how some stranger wants them to be. Off-white teeth, uncertainty, not getting laid. Certainly more connection there. Cellulite, your bad side. The goal you set to just get through the day. Abandoned eating plans are interesting. Slept through appointments and still being a good friend to yourself. That's interesting. I'm not saying escapism is dead. I'm not saying make-believe can't be idealized, but it's a bit different now because now we've all become the show. We are all on stage all the time. And it's exhausting. So the jester no longer tells the king or the queen the truth. The problem is the jester thinks he's the king. It's all a bit upside down. We are the most distracted, anxious version of us ever to walk this earth. Our attention has never been stretched this thin. We are not ADHD. We are the product of marketing gone wild. We think we're hyper-connected, but we're disconnected. We belong to false communities designed by brand strategies and run by algorithms. It looks like we are one big family, but we aren't. We are living more in our heads and more alone than we ever have before. And the funny thing is we're doing it next to each other. You're alone, I'm alone. It's crazy. I think we should execute one meaningful content creator every hour until we see psych med prescriptions plateau, at least. Then we can slow it down to once every 3 hours. I'm not thinking of it as mass murder for 1 second. I'm just thinking of using drones for something useful. Connected is interesting. There is a war for all of our attention at the moment. If you want to get involved in that war, if you want to succeed in that war, then if you want my attention, give me yours. It's that simple. And that's why I love the model. It's not statements, it's not 5 steps, just questions that you need to answer. I love that because reflection is the way forward. I always teach, stillness is capacity and attention is a superpower. It's a commodity. Everybody wants mine. How about I decide where I put it? And if someone gives me theirs, the least I can do is give mine back. Make it fair. For those of you into the theory of stuff, the Nash equilibrium is a beautiful thing. John Nash and the Beautiful Mind, most people know the movie. I don't know if you know his maths, but it's beautiful. And the Nash equilibrium is very simply a way for people to play a game on and on and on and on, playing their best game. So the way I explain it to brands is, if you treat your consumer like the other player in the game, and it's player versus player, very hard to keep winning because the game isn't fair. You want their money, their data, and their loyalty, and all you often give them is maybe a chance to win something that maybe they need. And some of the principles of the Nash equilibrium, which asks players a few questions in order to make sure you play the best game, you don't change your strategy by surprise, and you want to play again are, number one, make the payoff equitable. In this country, if we had equitable payoffs in the struggles between groups, perhaps that would work. The other thing they ask you to do is reveal your strategy up front. This is the most terrifying thing for any organization. Tell them your strategy. I want to be rich. I want to own the market. I want you to help me. I can't do it without you. So in doing that, you build vulnerability. And you lead vulnerability as the most powerful agent in the room. You don't expect it from the least powerful people. It's often how it goes here. In South Africa, it's a very interesting power struggle. So aim for the Nash equilibrium. Go and read about it. It's really good. And then the last thing I want to say to you is just some words, because I don't really know what I'm doing. I used to think I was a comedian. I don't know what I am now. But I've never been more happy. I'll leave you with these words of the Buddhist master Atisha. You will have to depart here leaving everything. So do not get attached. Thank you very much for your time today. I'm going to go away.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for those words of wisdom. And they were quite moving. In some parts, really funny in others. And it's the human condition, right? We're funny sometimes, we're sad sometimes, we're thoughtful sometimes. We go inside. So right now, we're just going to have Dutch and David for ask questions. And I think you can ask John Adam questions if you want, and Adam can ask you a question if you want. So yeah, now on screen, can you get Adam back on screen?
I thought for a second you forgot my name there, Kaya.
Oh.
We've got time for 3 questions, so we're gonna trim it back. If you're anything like me, I'm desperate for a coffee and perhaps a loo break. So I think let's try and wrap it up in the next few minutes. If I can just get 3 questions. I've got 1 from online here already, so 2 in the room. Yes. You can ask of John or of Adam or of anyone. Go for it. Just push the green. Yeah.
Good morning, afternoon, whatever. I'm not sure the time.
Still morning.
Okay. So a question written here by my colleague. How do you measure the dullness and improve in an NPO with no money? So we run
a not-for-profit?
A not-for-profit for disabilities, stroke survivors.
Right.
Now, as a product, it's very dull.
Yeah.
How do we change that? How do you market that?
How do you market a dull product?
How do you build a brand out of that?
Okay. I'm not sure if you want John to answer that question, or maybe Adam. I'm not sure I want John to answer that question.
I have a really short answer. I'll give you my version. I'm sure Adam has a better answer. But to me, and I've worked on things like this, you just need to build strategic partnerships. There is money. You just have to find it and explain to the money why it's worthwhile being aligned to you. You get the money. Phone me.
Okay. Phone him. Adam, do you want to comment on that?
I think the idea of using other people's money is a cracking idea, and I completely agree. There's a very interesting book called Strategy, written by the professor of marketing history at King's College London. It has 5 principles looking at, you look through human evolution, political evolution, cultural evolution, at what success factors are in strategy. And he has 3 key principles, and one of them is alliance and coalition. I completely agree with John on that front. I think John's point was very profound, wasn't it? It is about connection. I think it's not really about what your product is or isn't. It's about, can you connect? Can you find something in your situation, in yourself, that is an important and profound part of the human condition that allows you to connect with other people using strategic partners and other people's money. And I'm really interested in the fact that actually very often there's no such thing as a dull category. We can make them more interesting. I mean, I'm not a comedian, as will be apparent to you, but I'm a keen student of comedians, and I'd be interested in John's experience in this. But as part of a book I wrote a while ago called The Beautiful Constraint. I read a lot of Jerry Seinfeld's work, and Jerry Seinfeld, as a comedian, prides himself on not choosing the obvious stuff. He doesn't talk about sex, for instance, and make jokes about sex or, misogyny or that kind of stuff. He says, I like choosing really dull subjects and working out what's going to be interesting and amusing and entertaining about it. How can I create connection? So I think it's about how we make that connection and what we do with it and embracing the constraints. Anything can be interesting if we put our minds to it.
Thank you, Adam. You've partly answered this question, which comes from the online forum. Is there an observable trend between dullness and category, FMCG versus insurance, for example? And I think you've just partly answered that, but do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting is that if you were to plot on a map, interesting and dull, and then kind of important and unimportant, by and large in categories, the more unimportant it is, the more entertaining and interesting the communication is. So confectionery, completely unimportant, really. Very fun, very entertaining. Financial services, cars, big financial commitments for us, really big deal, really dull communication. So yes, there is a trend, but it's not quite the way you'd expect it to be, and it shouldn't be.
Great, thank you. We got one more question. Is that from Enzo? Hello, Enzo.
So, yeah, good morning. I don't know who the question is to, but maybe David to you, because you haven't spoken yet, one of the challenges I have is a lot of these discussions focus on communication as a way to change behavior and attitudes, when I think the real friction points for brands increasingly are product, channel, and experience. Yeah. And those are very hard to transform. Yeah. And I'm asking you, how do you migrate the thinking away from making an ad to solve a problem to fundamentally solving the product and service problem for a customer?
Yeah. Great question, as expected, Enzo. And thank you for directing that at me, by the way. Appreciate that. I'm hoping that the other two gentlemen will jump in here as well. But I can only suggest as a first kind of response that one has to start by measuring it, right? So I think if we have no data, we can't understand how well we're doing or not. And I think that's the amazing thing that Adam and the collaborators that he's pulled together on this initiative have done, is actually start to put a finger on where is the problem and how bad are we, right? Or how poor are we at delivering in this particular area? So whether it's product or experience, I think we need to start unpacking that, and we need data. The biggest thing, and Adam is working on streams of work that are entering those particular territories. Mentioned it earlier, that at Cannes next year will be focused on product, right? So I think beyond that, there is some information and data emerging on experience, but it's still early days. So Adam, I'll pass on to you just to talk about where this could go from a measurement perspective, and the kind of things that Enzo is talking about: distribution, channel, route to market, the things that actually are critical to brand and marketing success. How do we get to grips with dull in those areas?
And maybe David, before Adam answers, maybe because is to put you spoke about dull media, Adam. My challenge with media is fragmentation and the inability to get attention. When I look at how I consume media, I almost consume zero advertising, because all of my media is digital. The interruption is coarse, and I think it kind of builds a negative equity for those brands. Right. So I don't know the answer, but I can tell you the question is, you've got a lot of converging forces that says the classical theory of persuasion, which is around communication and emotion building, I think is under challenge.
Yep.
So I completely agree that's under challenge. I still think that the data shows that actually where you can do it well and you can be emotional in communication, it works really well. So your point about fragmentation, the point about competition for attention, the point about resentment of intrusion, I buy all of that completely. The model has changed and the world is changing. Going back to your question about where does one go and these new kinds of areas, I think, well, that's true, and we are doing, as David referenced, work on that. But John's point about boring as being obsessed with the obvious, I think is fundamental and as true in all of those things. And his point about connection and the human truth and connection is true in all of those things. So yes, I agree they are really important, and we are moving into those areas now. But the fundamental principles, I think, that John and I were talking to hold in them, we just need to start to quantify them a bit more carefully and measure them a bit more carefully, to David's point. I think a lot of the principles will be very similar, to be honest. The questions will be very similar.
Thank you, Adam. Any comments?
Just on, so I would maybe not distinguish between communication and experience. I think they have to become the same thing. What we found recently is that the only way to fix something is to train the people. Like train the people who actually end up interfacing with, and obviously they're brands that may not, but any human that comes into contact needs to be infused with more of, the connecting fiber of this offer. Like I said earlier, find out what is important about a stroke. Okay, there's got to be something. I know, my dad had a stroke, so I'm but there's something about that. Whatever you do, get the people to feel it, not the audience. The people offering it have to feel it, first. Then we offer it to them with feeling, and so I would always try and draw the experience into the communication.
And we'd welcome some data, Enzo. Bring it on. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, John. And back to Kaya, who's going to take us through the closing of the session.
Give it up for John and Adam. All right. Yes. All right. We also excited to. Can you just go back one slide for me, please? One more. Back. One more. Thank you. So we're also excited to announce that something special this October. We're launching our white paper, and it's called Africa's Beautiful Constraints. The paper explores, how survey companies and survey individuals are able to exploit, well, maybe the wrong word, I shouldn't say exploit, but who have looked at what many may see as constraints and reframe them as opportunities. They saw these problems and have solved them. In so doing, unlocked incredible growth. And by following us, you will get first dibs. There we go. Sorry, I'm sure it works now. All right, can you try again? We just checked. It should be working now. By following us, you will literally get first dibs on this white paper. And by the way, if you have any queries, I don't know why it keeps going back. Can you just go back to the QR code for me? Thank you very much. So if you have any queries and you are interested in what we do as a business, please mail David at Eat Big Fish Africa or myself at not myself, but Kaya at Eat Big Fish Africa, .africa. And I would say that, by the way, if you are a professional marketer, this will give you some CPD points. So it's not, don't think that this was a waste of your time, because I know that for me, what I've learned today, even though I've heard Adam's talk and John's talk, it feels valuable like every single time. I don't know what's happening, so can you just keep clicking for me? Click forward again, forward. Okay, thank you. Okay, technical issues every single time, ladies and gentlemen. It's my fault, it's definitely not the guy's fault. It's mine, I promise you. I'm the idiot in the room. I have a few more thank yous for us. So a massive thank you to Adam and to John. Please give them another round of applause again. And of course, I want to say thank you to Silas for hosting us. Where is Silas? Thank you very much. And finally, to our partners who made this event possible, the Daily Maverick, Masa, and the ACA. And thank you again for your unwavering support. And I have one more thing to ask of you, ladies and gentlemen. So, this is what I want to ask you to do. I know I'm going to sound like a call center agent, but please bear with me. If you could, again, take your phones out, we would really, really appreciate it if you're able to rate to give us a bit of there's a survey that's going to come up here. It's going to take you no more than 30 seconds. Literally, it's not going to take you more than 30 seconds to fill out. And once you have filled it in, we are giving away books by Adam Morgan. So, who's done? Are you guys finished? Are you guys finished? Are you guys finished? Just three is very quickly, 30 seconds, and you'll be done. And once you have completed your survey, I'm going to ask you to do one last thing. Okay? Look under your chair, and there should, if you find like a card there under your, that means that you've won a book. There are 3 books. Unfortunately, we're not Oprah. We can't give anyone a book. But if you find that card, please come to the front, and you will get your copy of a book. Who's got one? Who's got one? Anyone else? All right. Anyway, once you find it, please come to me, and we'll give you like your book. And thank you once again for coming through. And I hope you really you download our white papers. And also, please follow us on Instagram, and have a great day. Thank you so much.